Hello, in the previous video, we did an introduction to the course and an introduction to ESXi version 6.5. In this video, I will introduce you to ESX 6.5 based command line interface, the CLI. At the same time, it's important to understand that we will be looking at the interface that is essentially common to most versions of vSphere. So whether it is version 6.0 or 6.5, this interface that we're looking at, the command line interface, doesn't really change. The only thing changes in there would be the options that are available, because as new capabilities are added, there are new options that are available, obviously. So we will log into the ESXi direct console user interface. We'll take a look around very briefly there. We will look at the ESX CLI command structure. We will walk through some basic ESX CLI commands like ESX CLI network, ESX CLI software, ESX CLI system, and so on. We will also explore the VMFS directory /var/log directory and the sbin directory. In addition, we will look at some of the ESX CFG config commands that are likely to be deprecated later on, but at this point are certainly very useful. So I'm logged in into my ESXi host, and one can get into the DCUI or the direct console user interface by either being logged in into a terminal that's attached directly to your ESXi host, or you can key in DCUI here and you would essentially be in the same situation. F2, I key in my password and I will get the standard options that are available to me in the DCUI. So you're all familiar with this, so I will not spend too much time here. Let's escape out of it to log out. And now the question becomes, how do you get out of this? I normally hit a Control C and that gets me out back to my ESXi shell. So I'm in the lab, I'm logged in into a version 6.5 ESXi host, as you can see there. In case you're wondering what this user interface is, this is the HTML5 client, which according to VMware is going to be very prominent in the next version of vSphere, which is version 7.0. So while it's here at this point in time, it doesn't do very much, and if you're interested in looking at it, the best thing to do is to go into the IP address of your ESXi host, and with the /UI you will be able to get in there and then just log in basically as always, instead of the vSphere client which one uses for the web client. So it looks similar, but it doesn't have too much functionality right now, and it does not work well in very complicated situations. For example, I tried to unregister the VM. Here I had some orphan virtual machines which I tried to unregister in this HTML5 client, and it did not do it, and I had to do it through a different interface to actually make it work. But enough said about this HTML5 client. This is going to be your regular client as we move forward with version 7.0, but for now we are going to focus on other things. So now another interface into a version 6.5 ESXi host. So it's the same host where I showed you the HTML5 client. Now I'm logged in with a version 6 vSphere client, the classic vSphere client or the desktop client. You can see this is VMware ESXi 6.5. So this works fine, but just please understand that VMware has already said that with the next release of vSphere, which is version 7, this will be completely deprecated and not available. It functions fine, just like always has. So I'm now going to secure shell into my host 192.168.0.200, and we are going to explore the command line interface. So what it tells us is, of course, the server host key does not match the one Putty has and stuff. So I am going to basically click on yes, and when I do that, I am able to get the login screen into that host. So user ID and password, and of course I'm now logged in into the ESXi shell, and the ESXi shell gives us like a Linux-like shell into which we can then do some interesting things such as an ls. So when I do a list, can see there are some interesting directories in there, the usual ones of /user/var and so on, including /dev. That one sees in a regular Unix system. The etc is there, the lives and so on. This is interesting. The VMFS, this is obviously for the VMFS file system. So we do a cd VMFS and then do a list there, and it's devices and volumes. So let's do a cd devices ls, and you can see that these are all your VNX and so on, and actually it's a link to /dev. Okay, so you see all your devices up here. I go clear and do an ls again. I do a cd cd/vmfs/volumes, and when we list it, we see that these are basically the data stores that are available. So let's see if we are able to change directory to data store 1.2, and the answer is it is. But of course I can't do that because I put my double quotes in there. So let me just do this, cd d, and this will work. I hit clear, so I'm in that directory. Let's see, let's do an ls, and you can see that there is basically there are no virtual machines on that file system. The point of it is that this is a data store, and in /vmfs/volumes are where you find your VMFS volumes, and that's where you're able to, by using the standard Linux or Unix type list commands, you're able to manipulate files and move files around and so on. Let's go back to our directory there. Let's take a look at the /var log files, and we do a cd/var/log, do an ls. You can see there are lots of interesting ones like the VM kernel log, which is normally used for debugging. So we can do a tail-20 on the vmker go. And we can see there are some interesting things happening on vmnic 0. And the reason for this is that the vmnic 0 that I have on my system is old technology Intel. And I found that with ESXi 6.5 I get issues with it. Issues I did not have with version 6.0 update 2. So there are things that are happening, and we need to upgrade our hardware as well as we move forward. In fact, when I installed version 6.5 ESXi on my host, I got a warning that this level of CPU will not be supported in the next version of ESXi, which is going to be version 7 of ESXi. We hit clear again. Let's look at some of the other logs. vmk summary log, tail-20, vmk summary log, and there's a lot more stuff that's available here. And again, nothing much has changed here. If you're familiar with how to debug and look at logs from previous versions of VMware, nothing has changed here really in terms of vSphere 6.5 or vSphere 6.0. Clear again, and let's move on to some ESXi commands. So ESXi has in version 6.5 a few new options, because obviously version 6.5 ESXi has some new capabilities, but essentially it works exactly the same way as before. You key in ESXi and it gives you the available namespaces. So we're going to look at this namespace. I hit clear, ESXi, ESXi. Okay, and I put in a command, I retrieve. I hit command, and then of course I retrieve again, and I go to list. And this lists the various options that I have here in terms of a tree. Let's now take a look at the ESXi command line interface. So ESXi command line. Some of the options that we have here, for example, are ESXi network. ESXi network. You hit the enter key, it gives you the available namespaces. So I can go firewall NIC. Let's try NIC, ESX network NIC, the enter key, and it says all the available commands are these. I key in list, I retrieve the command, and I key in list, and these are my VM NICs that are operational at this right now. Let's do a clear. ESX CLI system is also an interesting namespace. As you can see, a lot of options up here. So ESX CLI system. Interesting ones are SNMP. We have syslog as well that we will see later. Of course, you can change the welcome message and the version. Let's look at ESX CLI system version and get. And we are looking at a version 6.5 system. ESX CLI software is an interesting command. This is how one installs, updates, removes, or displays individual virtual infrastructure bundles called WIBs. And of course, you can change image profiles and so on, again for a later time. Right now, we're just exploring ESX CLI. ESX CLI, some of the other options. So we looked at software, we looked at system. Let's look at storage. So ESX CLI storage. And now we see that we have storage core. We have NFS 4.1 native multipath plugin as the default implementation of the pluggable storage architecture. We have a pretty detailed section on PSA, all the pluggable storage architecture, later on in the course. Of course, the SAN, the virtual flash, VMFS, the vVols, file systems, and IO filters. So let's look at core, storage, core, and let's look at the various adapters. So core device list will give us the details of the various adapters that are on the system. Of course, one would pipe it through more, get a much better picture of what we're looking about that we're looking at. So of course, this is your NAA name for that, and then all the various options that are available. Now these options are settable as well, as we will see when we look at the command line when we're looking at the various storage options. I control C out of this, ESX CLI, and let's look at network. So ESX CLI network. And we have the options of firewall and stuff which we saw before. There's an option for the NICs we saw. Let's look at vSwitch, and it'll say whether are you looking for DVS or standard. I say DVS. I know I don't have any, and DVS, and this has VMware, and this is to separate it from the various Cisco Nexus 1000V or HP switches or IBM switches, which I haven't really seen ever, except the Nexus 1000V, which I'm quite familiar with actually. And there is no network vSwitch DVS VMware in there, and so we change this to vSwitch standard list. And of course, there's a vSwitch 0, as there always is in an ESXi host, and the various options are all there. We can of course set the options, and this has 6 uplinks, and this has 3 port groups: a management network, the VM network, and the VM kernel iSCSI. So let's clear this. Some other interesting commands. Let's go back to the top. ESX CFG commands, and now when I tab, you can see that there are many ESX config commands, and sometimes in terms of the ease of use, I guess would be the right way to say it, these ESX config commands are usually easier to use. Depends, a lot of people just like the ESX CLI. ESX CLI is really the future. So at some point I expect the ESX config commands to be deprecated. But until that happens, I would encourage you to take a look at the ESX config commands in your free time, because you will learn a lot from that. For example, ESX config NICs, I can set the speeds, duplex, auto list, restore, help, and so on. There are also some interesting ESX config commands that we use later on in the course when we do the pluggable storage architecture. Okay, so you have an idea of the ESX config commands. Let's look at the etcd to etcsi/VMware. This is basically a quick review of what's available on an ESXi host, and we are looking at a 6.5 host, a version 6.5, but really it is the same and has been for quite some time. So when you look at the etcsi VMware, this is where your firewall resides. So when I do cd to firewall, and we will actually configure the firewall later on, we will see, we'll look at the XML and so on, and we'll fix the XML, or not fix, but we will add other services to the XML file, and that is for a later part of the course. I do a cd .. and I go to SSL and do an ls, and this is where you have the certificate and the RUI certificate and the keys here, and this is where the PEM files and stuff are stored, and this is where, when you change certificates and keys, this is where you do your work. Of course, there's VPXA, VM support, so on, that would be used later on. So a very useful place or a folder to actually look at would be the etcsi VMware. There are some other commands as well. So if you look at the sbin directory, we cd to sbin, do an ls. There's a whole bunch of ESX kind of commands up here, and I would again encourage you to take a look at some of these because they are really useful. In the course, we will look at this command, the vscsi stats command, and a few others as well. Now, if you look at this, there is something called VM dumper also, which is a very useful one. So sbin/VM dumper. So I'm going to key in the proper command, sbin/VM dumper, so that I have the right versions here. Okay, print a friendly help message, sbin VM dumper. It tells you, this is a very interesting one because it allows us to basically force dumps and so on, and I found this useful when systems are hanging and I need to do something about it. I'm able to actually take care of it using sbin VM dumper. We need a world ID for that, which is basically the kind of a process ID for a virtual machine, as you probably already know. You have the ability to send, and this is what I was talking about when I said I like to take dumps sometimes when things are hung. This sends a non-maskable interrupt to the virtual machine, and you get a nice dump which you can then analyze if you feel like it. The VSI shell is also very interesting, and you should explore this on your own. Put this in, puts me into a new shell. I key in help, and I get a whole list of commands, and there are some very interesting commands that are available here. Allows you to do some very sophisticated things. Again, I think you would normally not use it in practice, but you might have to understand that this is available when you're working with VMware support. We are at an early part of this course, so we are not going to go too much into it, but you should know that when you go into reliability, there are some interesting things that one can do to actually manipulate the environment. I am going to quit out of this by hitting Q. I hit clear, and I go back to my root directory, and I go ls. So we have seen the etcsi VMware subdirectory. We've taken a look at the VMFS, where all the systems are. VM images would probably have the VM images, and we can cd to VM images, and we do an ls, and we have the tools ISO images. And so with that, we come to the end of our brief review of the command line. It's a very Linuxy, Unixy kind of a command line, and the ESX CLI command and the ESX config command, as well as the etcsi VMware directories and the VMFS directories are ones that we will use quite a bit. The rest of the course is all completely based on labs, and the labs are with the web client, and also I go into the command line quite a bit. So by the end of the course, you will feel very comfortable working with the command line for all aspects of VMware vSphere 6.5. In this section, we explored the contents of our course. We also had a brief introduction to VMware vSphere 6.5, and we are going to be looking at administering advanced vSphere 6 networking in the next section. I look forward to seeing you there.